It says it's doing pronouncing them yourself. Okay.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another episode in the ongoing saga of life in this material world. Today is the end of a special day in the Jewish calendar. As you may know, every 29-30 days in the lunar Jewish calendar, we celebrate a Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh means the head or the beginning of a new month. And it refers to actually a new moon. Chodesh also means renewal. It's the renewal of the moon. In the lunar cycle, which is the Jewish calendar, follows the lunar cycle. So as we know, the moon wanes and waxes and wanes. And then just as it wanes to the point where you see no moon, there's the birth of a new moon. And that designates the day called Rosh Chodesh, the beginning of a new month. So today was Rosh Chodesh Sivan, which is the third month from the month when the Jews left Egypt. In the Torah, in the Bible, months are referred to by number, not by name. So the number is the third month, the Chodesh HaShlishi. And this particular day, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, is actually referred to in the Torah in the book of Exodus. In the story of the revelation of Sinai, so it says in the Torah, Chodesh HaShlishi, B'yom hazeh, in the third month, on this day, and the Talmud and the sages derive from the word B'yom hazeh, hazeh, they derive. This day means Rosh Chodesh of the third month, the first day of the third month. The Jews arrived at Mount Sinai. Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Har. And the Jewish people, Yisrael, the Jews, rested there across the mountain. That's the expression. So B'chodesh HaShlishi v'yom hazeh bo l'Har Sinai vayichan Yisrael neged Har. So the commentaries ask the question, the Medrash and Rashi, the classic commentator, asked the question, the expression Vayichan Sham Yisrael neged Har is a problem. It should have said Vayachnu. Vayichan Sham Yisrael in Hebrew means as if one person. Vayichan is the word used when one singular, in Hebrew the singular Vayichan. When you're talking about a group of millions of people, it should have said Vayachnu, which is the Hebrew word. And Rashi on this Rosh Chodesh Sivan explains, because when they arrived at Mount Sinai, they were like one person, K'ish echad, like one human being, one organism, b'lev echad. K'ish echad b'lev echad, like one person with one heart. And that's why the Torah refers to them not as a group of many different individuals, but as one entity. And the Medrash elaborates that up to that point, there was arguments, conflict, divisiveness between the people. And when they came to Mount Sinai, something happened that caused them all to unite as one person with one heart. So the theme of this evening, appropriately, being that we are today 3,320 years from that Rosh Chodesh Sivan, we count and we know exactly, so it's appropriate to use this day, and every day in Judaism has energy. As I've discussed many times, that in Jewish thought, time is not linear, it's like a spiral, meaning that it repeats itself like an orbit. It repeats every time that day in the year, repeats and recreates the same energy that existed in that same time, which would mean that your birthday is not just commemorating something that happened the moment of your birth years ago, but it's actually recreating a particular type of spiritual energy that manifested in that moment in time. And being timed as like a spiral, think of it that every year it returns to that point. I specifically say a spiral, not a cycle, because a cycle would mean it just repeats and it's exactly the same. A spiral, like a spring, means the orbit is in one circle, but it returns to that point, but on a different plane. So every year the same energy is recreated. That's why birthdays and even holidays are not just in Jewish thought commemorative days. So Rosh Hashanah, we're not just remembering that years ago on this day the human race was created, the human and creation and the existence was created, but it actually repeats and recreates that moment. So your birthday has power because on that day, every year, there's some door that opens up, some energy that flows into existence, and it's up to us to make the containers, to contain and channel it into our lives. So holidays have therefore that much more power and much more import because of that reason. So, on this Rosh Chodesh Sivan, the events that happened 3,320 years ago, as distant as that may sound, actually return to us on a different plane, but the same point of the spiral. So it's an energy of unity, it's an energy of love, it's an energy of Ki'ish echad b'lev echad. It's one organism, one person with one heart. Now, what exactly was the power of Sinai that brought everyone together in that way? As I said before that, there was conflict. There was discord between the people, which is a common thing. Of course, for Jews, it always happens to be 3 Jews in a room, there are 4 opinions. Jews love to argue. Those 2 remaining Jews in Afghanistan, only 2, don't speak to each other because each of them thinks they're the head of the community, of the Jewish community. And in human beings in general, it would seem obvious, it would seem natural, that being, as the Talmud puts it, ein de'aseh shavos, that no 2 people think alike, just like no 2 faces are the same, no 2 people's disposition or personalities are the same. So put a few people together, they're going to be different opinions if they're healthy human beings. That per se is not only is not a problem, it's actually a healthy thing. That we have different ways of looking at things, and hopefully through comparing notes and discussing and arguing, debating with good intentions in mind, we can arrive at a crystallized concept. Well, any good team that is researching some issue or topic or product, what makes a good team is that you have very different type of mindsets, different type of personalities. Some may be more idealistic and more dreamlike, others are more practical. Dreamers are more practical and more pragmatic. And a combination of many different ideas and people arguing back and forth. And if the egos are kept at bay, you come away with the best result because you really have toyed and you've played with the idea to the point where you come out with a crystal clear picture, which essentially is really the story of the Talmud. If any of you have ever studied Talmud, the classical magnum opus of all really legal Jewish law, which became the basis of many of the constitutions of our times. The Talmud is all about the dialogue and debate and argument, all with peaceful intentions, not ego-driven, but argument based on the intention of trying to get the clearest and best concept. So the arguments between the sages, each one brings their case, and then there's a counter-argument and a counter-argument, and they compare it to other situations and precedents and so on and so forth. All results in a very crystal clear result because it's been analyzed and dissected in every which way. You can rely on a crystal picture. What we call libun hilchasa, the whitening. Libun means the crystallization to the point of like whitening, like the bleaching of an idea. that when you take an idea and initially, no matter how good it may be, we can't really know whether it's correct or not, a theory. How do you determine whether the theory is correct or not? You begin to challenge it under different circumstances. You allow other people to look at it. Back and forth, you're a healthy person, you're going to welcome this type of challenge, this type of skepticism. People who are really thorough in their own minds make sure to always challenge their own best ideas. And the end result usually will be the best one because you've really allowed the idea to incubate and to gestate to the point that you come away with the best type of conclusion. Most mistakes are made when we don't allow that to happen. When you have your opinion and you're either obstinate or pride or arrogant or lazy or insecure, and you don't let your idea be challenged. And what usually happens is you become then a victim of your own ideas, for good or for bad, so your perspective about yourself, if it's a distorted one, is going to be very distorted, and you will ultimately suffer from your own myopic vision, which is why we go to objective people for advice. Well, most of us make these mistakes all the time, especially in the emotional arena, because it's not easy to challenge yourself. People don't like to acknowledge mistakes, and what happens as a result is that you usually make more mistakes. It's like a cover-up. When one mistake is covering up for the previous mistake, and so on and so forth. Even in business, this is so. Speak to some accountants. I once heard an accountant tell me that the biggest problem he has in being an accountant is that his clients who pay him money to be a honest accountant don't want to hear his results. They don't want to hear at the end of the year they made a mistake and blew $1 million here or $1 million there. They'd rather feel good about themselves than allow their own business to be destroyed. At least they don't look bad in their own eyes. We're not even talking about being accountable to others. And people have, it may sound weird, but this is called the concept of self-destructive behavior. Is anybody aware of such a concept here? Or this is not in the realm of anyone in this room?
Doesn't apply.
Doesn't apply. Okay. So why are you here, my friends? As perfect human beings, we're trying to be more perfect, right? Okay. So, if you think about it, self-destructive behavior seems to be the oddest thing. How is it possible? A person, you love yourself more than anybody else, to the point that you're ready to hurt others, often, God forbid, for your own self-interest. How could a person driven by self-interest just hurt themselves? Did you ever think of that? It's like if you think of it, if you told this to an objective party who never saw that before, they'd say, it's impossible.
It's very easy.
You could see you hurting others, but hurting yourself, you should be caring about your own self-interest. The answer, of course, is that we are crazy human beings, basically. What I mean by that is that we're very complex, is the word they like to say. Issues. We've got issues. And when if we were computers and you feed into a computer data, so you get a result. It's going to be an objective result. The computer doesn't have any feelings about the matter. 2 plus 2 is always going to equal 4. But since we are not just minds with rationale, we also have a heart. And a heart means we have feelings. And we have instincts and impulses. And our feelings, on one hand, can make us great people. We're not dry computers that just process information and data. We feel, we experience. But on the other hand, feelings also have the side, I don't know if it's a side effect, it's inherent to feelings, is called subjectivity. And subjectivity means it blinds us. That when you have interest, it blinds you to the point you cannot see clearly a reality around you. That means that you may do something, not you want to necessarily be hurtful to yourself. There's that phenomenon too. People who intentionally or unintentionally, unconsciously want to hurt themselves. Or by hurting themselves, they have a good excuse for not succeeding because they're always in some type of predicament. But even if it wasn't that situation, the fact that we are blinded, we can't see clearly. So you may think this is a sweet gift, and in truth it's fire. You put your hand in it, and you get burned. Sometimes you don't even feel the burn. Physical fire, you feel the burn. So how is all that possible? Is because the emotions cloud our judgment, they cloud our perception. We have blind spots and we can't see clearly. The way the Talmud puts it is Ein Adam Evra Avera Ele Imkein Nichnas by Ruach Shtus. A person cannot do a sin against other human beings and against God unless something enters into them, a moment of insanity, a spirit of insanity. Ruach shtus. It's an interesting word. Ruach is a spirit of shtus, of insanity, of mishugas.
Foolishness.
You can say insanity. I mean, semantics, the idea is clear. It's for that moment. You mean if it's clinical insane? If a person, so, question is asked why? You could say a person sins because they have a temptation. They're seduced by something. They see something. May not be good for them. Maybe a sin. But the moment, instant gratification consumes them, and you sin. What is the statement that a person doesn't sin unless there's a ruach shtus? And the expression is not that a person sins also because of a moment of insanity, of shtus. It's no person will sin unless there's in a moment of insanity. So it's exclusive of any other reason. So the answer given is the following. And this will bring us back to Rosh Chodesh Sivan. The answer given is to use a halachic precedent, an example. It's a Talmudic exercise. There's laws in the Torah about the responsibility that we have to each other. So one of the laws regarding a guard, a hired guard. There's actually in the Torah 4 types of different guardians. Let's say you hire someone for pay. If it's not for pay, there's more lenient laws because it was a volunteer. But you paid someone to protect your property. I mean, the equivalent of today of putting something in storage or hiring someone to watch your property. So, of course, there's a contract and there's certain requirements. Besides, you paid for certain services. They're required to protect your property. And if your property is damaged under their care, they're liable. However, there are, of course, exceptions. Are they liable for everything? Or the same as the laws of insurance are based on these principles. This is all based on the Talmud, actually. The Talmudic thought on this, the thoroughness of Talmudic logic really became the basis of modern laws of insurance, laws of protection, and so on. So here's the scenario. You hire someone to guard your animal. In those days, an animal was a part of your people's property. It was a common part. If someone had property, an animal, say a cow, and you paid them to watch over this animal. What happens if the animal, for instance, falls off a cliff? The guard is responsible. Why are you walking an animal near a cliff? It's a natural danger. But here's the question: what happens if you're walking with an animal in a regular, normal place, and there's a fire on the side, and the animal jumps into the fire? So the question is asked: who's responsible? The answer is given that the guard is not responsible. Why? Because no normal animal will jump into a fire. Unless you had told the guard when you hired him that this animal is crazy and this animal has some weird thing that it could be self-destructive and jump into fire, how was the guard supposed to know? So there's a fire on the side, he didn't take any special precautions. If, as I said, there's a pit or some natural thing that the animal couldn't see, that's why you're hired. But that fire on the side, the animal jumps into the fire. How would you know that this is called a behemoth shaita, an insane animal? So what do we know from this? That even an animal has instincts that will not do something self-destructive. No animal will jump into fire. The same is with us humans. Would any healthy person put their hand in fire? Absolutely not. Instinctively, you'll protect yourself. So how is it possible, basically, that we can hurt each other if we are all one organism and created by one creator and all parts of one inherent unity that is a thread that connects all of us? How is it possible that one of us can hurt another? The answer is it's a moment of insanity. It's like a blindness. You don't see that the other person is part of you. And the same is true as how we can hurt ourselves. We don't see we're hurting ourselves. Because as I said, no normal person would do something self-destructive. So how is it possible? Because we're blinded for that moment. And what's blinding us? Our own emotional subjectivity, the biases we have. And yes, we can really hurt ourselves in very severe ways. As I said, it could be pride, it could be obstinance, it could be just plain ignorance, and it could be above all it's insecurity, the inability to confront your own self, a mistake we make. And instead and I've seen this in the most tragic ways, a person will do everything to cover up their own misjudgments. At least they shouldn't look bad to themselves or to others. And in the process, hurt themselves more than anybody else. As I said, to hurt another is also bad. But there you could at least argue, fine, your self-interest, you trample over another. But how could a person hurt themselves? But that's how strange creatures we are. We have that ability, and it is a moment of insanity. It's a certain blindness. So to go back, what I was discussing here was the Talmud is based on this whole principle of discussion, of debate, of dialogue. You'll always see the sign of a secure person is the person who can allow anyone to challenge them. Insecure person cannot stand being challenged. They say something, they don't want to hear another opinion. I mean, they'll mask it, and if they're intelligent, in all kinds of excuses that they thought it through and they already consulted and they're smarter than everyone. There's many good reasons why people don't listen to others, but secure people have no problem reviewing it again. If you're secure with your idea, why not be challenged? And on the contrary, if the result is that you're wrong, a secure person will be the first to acknowledge it. And if it's just and if it confirms that you're right after you're challenged, then it only intensifies the clarity the clarity of the issue. And the whole Talmud is based on that. When you look at the Talmud for the first time, and I've studied Talmud with different people who didn't know the style of the Talmud, you think it's like one big debate. Everyone's arguing. And you think about it, it's really the biggest act of love, because people are trying to crystallize the ideas and come away with the best conclusions. And it's the love that brings people in that way. I mean, you see families that can argue that way, and I mean an argument that does not carry over and spill over into personal resentment and personalization, that you disagree with me, then you must hate me, or I hate you. But an argument that comes is one of the most beautiful things in a healthy family. That no one is silenced. People can speak. It's a sign of security. It's a sign of health. So the idea of having many different opinions is actually the process of all great ideas evolve from that. As a matter of fact, brilliant people, truly brilliant people who come away with unbelievable insights are able to do it with themselves. No one is completely objective, but a good mind challenges itself. You think of an idea, then you say maybe the other way. Maybe I got it all wrong. You have no problem challenging it. It's not about just going for something because it came to you. So here we have Rosh Chodesh Sivan, that till that point, the Talmud, the Medrash says, the Jews were arguing with each other. And when they came before Mount Sinai, they suddenly became Ki'ish Echad, B'Lev Echad. Like one person, like one organism, with one heart. So what happened? And here we got to go, we have to discuss the element of arguing when it's unhealthy argument. Some of you may be familiar that during this period in time, which is one of the reasons we don't do weddings during the counting of the Omer, the 49-day period between Passover and Shavuos, because the students of Rabbi Akiva, 24,000 students, got into discord and argument between each other, to the point that they died in a magef, an epidemic, because of their fierce quarreling and fighting with each other. Now their fighting was also coming from a good place. They were all brilliant students, and they couldn't agree with each other. So why was there such an epidemic? Based on what I just said, was the problem. That's the best idea. The best love is when people are able to argue. But their argument went to the point of personalization, which is where difference of opinions turned into true resentment, to true divisiveness, to true conflict. Not just loving people trying to find out what the idea is. And the holy books explain that the 24,000 students of Rabbi Akiva, in their greatness, is what caused them to self-destruct. Why? Because their minds were so powerful, each of them had it so clear in his own mind, could not tolerate the other person's opinion. So out of the great light didn't allow them to coexist. In Kabbalistic terminology, you may have heard of the concept called the shattering of the containers. Shvirat HaKelim. And the idea goes like this: on a cosmic level, when the light is too powerful for a container, what happens? The container shatters. Think of a container that's holding powerful energy, and the energy gets too much for the container will shatter. Psychologically speaking, this is what happens, for instance, if a brilliant teacher tries to convey ideas to a beginner student to the point that it overwhelms the student. So you can shatter the container of the student's mind, not just overwhelm, but also confuse the student. Or when you try to give love to someone and they're not able to contain your love. Or, for instance, water, rain. Rain is a blessing. It waters the fields. What happens if the rain comes down, torrential floods? It can destroy the same water that is so necessary for growth. The same water can be the most destructive force if it doesn't come down in a seasoned and in a tempered manner, as raindrops. The blessing of rain is the raindrops, not just the rain. It comes down drop by drop, it's absorbed, and then more drops can come. So you can have the equal amount of water, even more water, but if it comes down in drops, it's fine. But if it comes down as a downpour, a flood, it will destroy the fields. It will be too powerful. The Talmud is in a story where Cheni HaMagel was praying because of a famine for rain. So his prayers were fulfilled and it started pouring and was destroying the fields. So he prayed again and said, Reif Teva, Ein Mechel L'Kabel. So much abundance of good we cannot contain, we can't receive. So sometimes the prayer is to get the good, sometimes the prayer is that the good should be able to be containable. So in that context, what we call chesed and gvura is the balance that channels love. You want to give love, but you have to also know whether the person you're giving to is able to contain what you're ready to give. Often I see people hurting others in the name of love, including parents hurting children because they just want to give, it's all about you. But there's another person, takes two to tango. And the other person has containers. They may not be ready for what you want to give. They have to be paced properly. It's like communicating anything. You want to communicate a powerful idea. It has to be done in a proper fashion. Communication, education is not just about conveying ideas, it's also conveying them in a timely way. Timing. When you say what comes first, what comes second. Real master teachers know how to pace that in a way that the containers can absorb, and not just that they know how to transmit. So it's transmission and it's reception that's necessary. So in that context, what happened with the students of Rabbi Akiva, they were just transmitting and transmitting and transmitting. Their intentions initially were good. They really believed in something, they had their philosophical perspectives, but to the point they got so consumed with their transmission of their idea, of how they felt about it, they no longer were able to tolerate their friends, their own colleagues. So that's when where disagreement or different opinions spills over into a destructive behavior where people go into war and conflict. It may begin with good intentions, but the bottom line, the end result is personal hatred, resentment, inability to tolerate another opinion, even if you're completely right. So think of a great scholar who really is a sharp mind, who's paid the price and has earned his academic credentials. And he meets a simple peasant who doesn't have any credentials, has no knowledge, has no experience. What would be the healthy attitude of this brilliant teacher, brilliant scholar, to this simple peasant? And let's say they have a discussion, and the simple peasant doesn't know necessarily what kind of scholar this is, or he's arrogant even, and he thinks he's an equal to the scholar. So you can have two attitudes. The scholar can be very condescending, and for good reason. He's a brilliant scholar. He's for years and years earned his right. He has studied, he has immersed himself, an expert. And here's this little pipsqueak, a person who doesn't know anything, a novice, and doesn't know his position even to recognize. So in a way you could say maybe it would be healthy to put him in his place. Like, who are you? And you see this often. It may be disrespectful, it may be other ways. But we're taught that there's a scholar that's even greater than that. He may recognize as well the shortcomings of the other person, but his attitude will be one of compassion and empathy, and doesn't have to pull rank and push enforce and demonstrate that he's smarter and belittle another person, in his own way, he will say certain things that will itself be an education process. So who is the greater man? Obviously it's a loaded question, it's obvious. What distinguishes between the two? The distinguishes between the two that the first one is about himself. He's taken his own intelligence, his own scholarship personally, and he thinks that he's a genius. The other one knows that wisdom is not yours, Alex. It's in the domain of truth. You don't own the truth. The fact that you are a person that have earned your way through scholarship, through study, through hard labor, through hard exertion, and is just makes you more humble. So does knowledge and the acquisition of knowledge make you humbler or make you more arrogant? Look around. Why do some people become more arrogant and some become humbler? Well, it has a lot to do with how they see themselves before they acquire the knowledge, and ultimately how they really see truth. The Talmud says a fascinating thing. Hillel and Shammai argued about many, many things. It's a classical argument in the Talmud. And then came a point where the consensus was that that the ruling will go according to Hillel. And the Talmud asks why, and it gives a seemingly odd answer. The answer is because Hillel were anovim, they were humbler. Hillel was amveson hoya. Hillel was a humbler person than Shammai. This does by no means suggest that Shammai was not humble, but he was humbler. And how do we know this? The Talmud says, because when he would present his arguments, Hillel, he would first present Shammai's arguments and then his own. Usually someone presents their own argument and then secondary, and then in a dismissive way they present the second argument, if they even have to. Hillel would present Shammai's argument in full glory, and then he would present his own. And in a very honest way. And not in a way that he would rebut what he said. He presented two opinions. So the question is asked, humility is a great virtue, beautiful virtue. Maybe the greatest of all, to be a modest person. In the Torah, the only virtue you hear about Moses directly, as Rabbi Telushkin pointed out in last night's lecture in honor of my father, is humility. That Moshe Haya'anav Makala Adam, he was the humblest man that ever walked on earth. You don't find that Moses designated necessarily as the wisest man, as the godliest one, the humblest one. So it's a great virtue, no doubt. But what does it have to do with resolving a legal debate? A debate about Talmud. We're not talking about who's getting more points, so to speak, in being humble. You're talking about who gets more, who should we defer to in scholarship. And in scholarship, if the Talmud said Hillel's arguments were better, he's a sharper mind, that he brought his proofs from the verses of the Torah were more accurate, that would be a legitimate reason. What does humility have to do with a scholarly, a legal ruling, a scholarly presentation? And the answer is one word: objectivity. Above all, it's not the best arguments that you want, and it's not necessarily the greatest mind, the case you make, but is the person presenting them objectively? Because if the person is subjective people can present brilliant arguments, but you can't trust them because they may have an agenda. This is called bias. This is called faking what we find today in scientific inquiry. People fake results for their own because they have self-interest. The most important thing in true free inquiry, what's called truth, is objectivity. That's why in science it's a requirement that someone has to replicate the results that one scientist finds in the laboratory. Someone else has to be able to transparently see all the variables and replicate it. If you're not replicated, how could you trust the first person? Maybe self-interest drove them. So I'm not dismissing the power of the mind or scholarship per se, but the Torah is saying when we want a resolution, we have to go to someone that is objective, is able to acknowledge I made a mistake, present a different argument, and is able to do that. Then you know you can trust that person's opinion more. So though Shammai was a humble man, as I said, but Hillel was humbler. So to go back to the story with the students of Rabbi Akiva, they were great men, but their greatness was also their undoing. Their mind was so powerful they could not tolerate another, and they belittled other opinions. Rav Shimon Bar Yochai was one of the students of Rabbi Akiva, Lag BaOmer is his story, that survived that epidemic because he did not behave that way. But it's interesting, in the story of Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, he was a great sage. Some of you may also know that he was basically the father of Kabbalah. He's the author, though he didn't write it, his student Rabbi Abba wrote it, but he is the author that dictated the Zohar, the classic work of Jewish mysticism. So this Rav Shimon Bar Yochai had to escape from the Romans, because the Romans decreed, they had forbidden the study of Torah, and he continued, and they were looking to arrest him. He was a great leader of the time. So he hid in a cave. It's a long story about how he hid in a cave with his son for 12 years. When he now of course 12 years of studying, praying, immersing himself, disconnected from the material world in many ways, brought him to a very high, lofty spiritual level. And when the 12 years ended and the decree had been abolished, he came out of hiding, and he was so illuminated and was so ethereal, the Talmud says, that when he first came and saw people, and saw a town, he saw the pettiness that they're involved in, such so-called inferior activity. Literally, this town began to burn. Whether it's metaphorical or literal, but the point is that his looking and his intolerance due to his spiritual heights caused destruction around him. It's like a great man that wherever he walks, everything around him simply melts away. So God said to Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, listen to this. You have not achieved true spiritual maturity. Go back for another year. I did not create a universe to be destroyed, even by light. Go back another year and learn restraint. Learn the tools. Now wherever you go, don't make it burn, repair it. And Rashbi went back for a 13th year, bar mitzvah. And then when he came back, wherever he went, it says he repaired. He saw something broken, something petty. He taught, he educated, he inspired. So which is greater? Initially, from the outset, you'd think the greater spiritual one is so great, nothing around, everything burns. Everything burns up around him. But from the Torah's point of view, no. What's much greater is that you're able, the restraint that a great spiritual person exercises. It's like the silence of a wise person is much more powerful representation of the intelligence of the person than speaking. It takes much more effort, restraint. Because if a smart person has an opinion, that goes without saying. And a person who has love and wants to give love, that's great. You know where you see the beauty? When a person who's giving love looks at their child and knows how to measure the love, that the child can contain it. Because it's not about you. It's not about the transmitter. It's about the recipient as well. That takes much more effort. The wiser person is the one that can bring it down into smaller containers. So in a sense, in using Kabbalistic terminology, the higher you go, the lower you can bring it. The lower a certain energy is brought, the higher is its source. Think of it in terms of the book of in the Bible. It says, in the Tanakh, it says that King Solomon, the wise King Solomon, King Solomon was able to bring parables, a metaphor, 3,000 metaphors for any given subject. Okay, that's pretty amazing. 3,000 metaphors. How many people can give a few metaphors? But the real meaning of this verse is not that he was able to be so creative and good imagination of finding 3,000 different examples for a particular subject. If we all applied ourselves, we probably could do it. Maybe we couldn't do it. It's a pretty big feat. But what's even greater is what this explained is that he was able to give 3,000 levels of metaphors. A metaphor for a metaphor for a metaphor for a metaphor. So think of a most abstract concept. For it to be contained by a beginner, it needs many layers of metaphors. You usually think of one layer of metaphor. You give an example. But that's not really true. If you really think about intelligent ideas, you'll see ideas that we learned as children were metaphors dressed up in metaphors, dressed in metaphors and metaphors. But most of us can do it maybe 2, 3, 4 levels. 3,000 levels would require a mind that goes into such abstraction and is able at the same time to bring it down to the level of 3,000 levels lower than that in person. That's almost unfathomable to imagine. So, in this context, The students of Rabbi Akiva were great men, but their light destroyed each other. Greatness destroyed each other. So there are people that can destroy each other out of whether it's out of envy or pettiness or vice or ignorance. There's that form of destruction. But there's another form of destruction that the Torah warns us of. And this is a much more subtler one. When people destroy each other in the name of light. Great people with great minds, with great hearts and souls. And they haven't yet come to the point of maturity that they have to know restraint. You have to know respect for the other. Even if the other is wrong, listen. If you're so secure with your opinion, why not listen to another? So there are many brilliant people in this world, or I don't know if many, but there are some. And some, however, are unable to tolerate, are unable to listen to another. So going back to this day that we're talking about 3,320 years ago, Rosh Chodesh Sivan, on this day, the Jews who were arguing, after they left Egypt, they began to argue. So the initial argument was fine. As I said, argument is debate, discussion, with the goal of finding a crystallized concept. But their argument spilled over into personalization, and in their great light they began to hurt each other. But then they suddenly arrived at Mount Sinai, on this day. B'Chodesh HaShlishi, in the third month, B'Yom Hazeh, on this Rosh Chodesh, they arrived at Sinai, and it says, Vayichan Sham, and they rested there, as Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad. What happened? What happened was just the sight of the mountain. And they were all educated people, mind you. They were evolved people. They had gone through a lot of pain and suffering, but they were also highly, highly intelligent and spiritual. The Mount Sinai that they all knew was the purpose of existence. That at this point, at this place, they would receive the mandate. At this place, the divine revelation would connect matter and spirit, would unite the world. This suddenly transcended all their differences. And Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, they became as one. As one organism, Ki'ish Echad B'Lev Echad, with one heart. So discussing this unity, what really happened here? Does this mean that they lost their individuality or their identities? So to go back what I was saying earlier about secure people, a person who's superior in some way, maybe that's not a good word, but let's say someone of superior intelligence, and we're not talking about delusional. Someone actually has a certain strength or experience or expertise, or whether it's natural or it's environmental, nature or nurture, but they've achieved a certain level of excellence. So even on objective standards, it's clear that they should be deferred to in any given situation because they're experts in that particular situation. This doesn't mean it justifies that they belittle another person, as I said earlier, but essentially, it seems like the right thing to do. Yet at the same time, we find, as I said, that there are two types of scenarios. One where that so-called superior intelligence hurts others, and another where it builds others. It repairs. It doesn't burn up everything around it. It repairs everything around it. What exactly is the level of greatness of the latter over the former? The level of greatness is, number one, as I said, humility. But it's deeper than that. It's deeper than that. It's the person actually recognizes, in a humble fashion, that this truth is not mine. That though I have earned it, though I was blessed with it, though I exerted myself to reach this point, all the above on many other reasons, it's never mine. Moses was the humblest person that walked on earth, not because he had low self-esteem, because he was delusional. He knew quite well he was chosen by God. He knew quite well that he was the one that brought the Torah down from Sinai. He led the Jews out of Egypt. He did not delude himself, but he always said to himself that these are gifts that I was blessed with. Had another person been born with the gifts that God gave me, they may have done, or they would have done better than I. That's humility. It's very realistic, but it's never about you. So when the Jews came to Mount Sinai and they saw the presence of the mountain, of something beyond all of them, they suddenly recognized and realized it's not about them. So their arguments melted away, not because they compromised their positions, but because they recognized something greater than themselves. Because most people would say, listen, if I feel I'm right and someone else is wrong, I have only two options. Either I let them know that I'm right and make a case for it, or I shut up and compromise myself in my opinion. Now, this is the classic manipulative tool where you say to somebody who loves you and say, listen, you want to hear what I have to say? You don't want to hear what I have to say. And then when you say it, they say, hey, how could you say that? I thought you didn't want to hear it. You want to hear what I want to say? You hear this all the time. Now what's wrong with this so-called logic? What's wrong is what's missing here is a little humility. A little humility. It's a nice mathematical, you can get someone stuck there because either you want to hear or you don't want to hear. But if you really love the person, you really cared about them, maybe there's a third thing going on here. Not who's right, but whether people can communicate with each other. Maybe this person can't hear what you have to say right now. Maybe you're just being too arrogant even though you're right. Just because you're right doesn't mean you're not arrogant. I understand the argument goes the other way around. Just because you're arrogant doesn't mean you're not right. You know? But the fact of the matter is that arrogance doesn't really let others hear you. So maybe, yes, you're right in the sense of your message may be right, your logic is right, but your personality isn't right. Because arrogance is definitely not a true or right. Why would you have to be arrogant? Why don't you just convey it in a way that a person can listen to it? And if the person can't listen, it maybe shows you're not so intelligent as you thought you were. And it goes back to security. A secure person could hear that statement that I just made. An insecure person will argue about it. Anybody wants to argue here? Huh? And I speak for myself as well. I definitely have been in both positions. It's not like it always works one way. But it's important to look at yourself and know that we could be both ways and really look at it in an honest fashion. So there's something deeper than just a correct equation of truth. There's a thing called integrity, honesty, love, caring. If you love your child, for instance, and you know your child is wrong, I'm not talking about if supporting that wrong will create more hurt. The child is wrong about a particular thing. But in every case you have to prove that you're right and the child is wrong. Yeah, two children do that. Your baby comes over to you, a little 2-year-old, starts kicking you and scratching you, though it's obviously not appropriate, you're not going to get down to your knees and start kicking and scratching in return. I should hope so, at least. An adult insults you, usually we return the insult, because we see them as equals. Well, why won't you do that with a child? Because it's just not appropriate. It's not about who's right. Obviously, you want to teach your child manners, but sometimes a child's going to have a tantrum, and sometimes a child doesn't know better. So it's all about case by case. It's not just a black and white thing, who's right and who's wrong. That's true when you have a relationship with the people you're speaking to, and it's not just about the computerized right and wrong. So the Jews were arguing with each other as they left Egypt, the Medrash says, but then when they came to Sinai, suddenly they were reminded why they're here. And it's to their credit, because they could have been so consumed with their arguments they wouldn't even notice that they were in the presence of something greater. That can also happen. On a small scale, I've told the story here just recently. I met a couple who already have now beautiful children. 10 years ago, when people suggested they marry each other, they both rejected the idea absolutely. First one said, now they're married, that same two people with children, and they're very happy. So I asked them, so what happened 10 years ago? What do you remember? Like, why were you so adamant? And I remember when they were adamant. So he says, well, you know something, I was busy at work and I really couldn't see. I was blinded. I didn't really see who she was. And she had similar answer. She was busy with her own stuff as well. No, but they acknowledge it. So I thought to myself, and I didn't say it to them, but I thought to myself, how many of us are doing exactly that? That due to all kinds of other things in our lives, we're basically not allowing ourselves to see a presence of something greater. And we're just so consumed. And who's being hurt? No one else except yourself. So to the credit of the Jewish people, as they came to Mount Sinai, no matter their differences, they realized suddenly there's something higher. And as a result, they became ki'ish echad b'lev echad. They became as one person with one heart. And again, this does not mean they compromise their differences or their individuality or their identities. Because as I said earlier, the most intelligent person is the one, not compromise because he doesn't always make a case for his for being right. It's because he's gauging. Maybe this is not the moment. Maybe a person has to come to it on their own. Wise mentors are the ones that don't tell you what to do, even if they know. They teach you how you should find the answer yourself. They'll tell you enough for you to know. Now, why don't they just blurt it out and show how smart they are? And then you say, oh, wow, you're brilliant. Because it's not about them. It's about what should be done, and it's much healthier and wiser for a person to come to a conclusion that may just be inside of them, but they may be blocked a bit. That's why many people ask me about going to Kabbalists or to all kinds of different mystics or soothsayers or crystal ball stuff. So there's an expression in Kabbalah with real Kabbalists, which not many people like this expression because it basically does away with this whole shortcut, and that is those that know don't say, and those that say don't know. So whenever I start a class that's so-called titled Kabbalah, which of course is always a sexy title, it's Kabbalah, add the Kabbalah of, let's say, romance, and you'll have twice as many people come. Instead of the art of romance, let's say. Or the Kabbalah of money, or the Kabbalah of whatever. That's how it is. You become like a so-called insider trading thing. Like Kabbalah, you're going to get the insights. But people do it, and I have no problem with that. But often I always just begin with a disclaimer saying, listen, when it comes to real Kabbalah, I cannot help but tell you that those that know don't say, and those that say don't know. So I'm somewhat of a predicament, because if I say anything, it will, it will reveal that. But the truth is that's the case. I have been around real Kabbalists. There aren't many in this world, trust me. There are people who claim they are, especially I've been around the real Kabbalist, son of a Kabbalist, generations of Kabbalists. And I never heard magic secrets of life being sold. I emphasize the word sold. Not for free and not for money. Because it's about truth. And a true person of the soul is going to teach you how you have a soul, and you don't have to buy it from anyone. And they teach you the tools how to access your own soul. Is it true that at times you may need to go to a prophet, so to speak? Yeah, you find that in the Torah, obviously, and you have there are the secrets of the stars, the zodiac, and there's palm reading, and there's face reading. You have all of this in the Zohar, but you still don't see it as part of mainstream Jewish thinking. Why? Because you have to earn your way to go there. The Torah is very, very wary of the sensationalism that many of us gravitate to. When you have problems in life, you think you can find out the future, it's going to solve your problems. The Torah, above all, Tomim ti im Hashem Elokecha. Go with a simple approach. It's all about your responsibility. If knowing the future is going to make you more responsible, you'll be told. Or the way that it's usually said, if you need to know something in your life about previous lives, or about dream interpretation, you'll be told. And if you're not told, it means you don't need to know it. How do you gauge this? This is people of integrity, of truth and honesty will be able to share that. The Arizal was a great Kabbalist, and he did tell some of his students secrets of their soul. But he was talking to people who earned their way. They were not looking for a cop-out. They were not looking for an excuse. These are people who studied most of the day, who prayed, who worked hard. So you're not talking to as an easy path. But I've gotten over a little on a sidetrack. To go back to the theme here. So when the Jews came and they saw this higher presence, it transcended their differences, but not annihilated them. As I said earlier, the true wise person knows when to be silent. You cannot recognize true wisdom, because true wisdom is usually not going to be advertised. It's usually seen more in restraint than in what is said. The masters or mentors that I've been around, and there aren't very many, but the ones that I truly had the deepest of impact on me, I appreciate them now much more than when I had access to them. Because I saw what they didn't say was even more powerful than what they did say. But you could only see that in time. Because as I said, it wasn't about any glory, it wasn't about demonstrating a point, making a point, or showing you up or something like that. It was about a commitment to the truth of the message, and the truth within each of us, and the dignity within each of us. Because you see, it's not all about the brains or about the scholarship. So when the Jews came to Mount Sinai, they realized that their friends and their neighbors also have souls, and they also have opinions. That doesn't mean you're not an expert in what you are, but think of it like musical notes. If every one of us felt we're a musical note in one large composition, and your note is indispensable, period. Nothing anyone can do, no one can take it away, only you can play that musical note. And if you knew that deep in your heart, in a very secure way, and it was cultivated and instilled, imbued in you from young age, no one can take that away from you. You have that sense of yourself. You would have a difficulty coexisting with anyone? You would have no difficulty. On the contrary, because you know your place, you know your identity. And then on the contrary, you would look for other musical notes to complement your own. By contrast, the converse is also true. If you don't know your note, or you question it, or it's constantly shifting, or you're insecure with it, what's going to happen? You see others, you start wondering, maybe they're taking something away from you. In other words, it creates a climate where coexistence is almost impossible. Now this is a very simple, but it's a very fundamental and profound idea that lies at the heart of most of our problems, frankly. They tell this story about a guy came to the Kotzker Rebbe. Kotzker Rebbe was very known for his sharpness, and he had a successful business in town. What's he want from the Rebbe? He says to the Rebbe that someone opened up a business in the same town that's competitive. So the Rebbe says, what do you want from me? I want you to tell him to close, because it's not legal, Sagas Gvul. Anyway, the Rebbe says to him, well, let me tell you something. You ever see when a horse comes to drink water at a bank of river? Yeah, okay. So a horse comes to the river, and what happens? Before it bends down to drink water, you see the horse starts stamping its feet in the ground before it drinks the water. You'll always see a horse drink. And he asked him, why does the horse stamp its feet? He says, he doesn't know why. That's how it is. He says, no, I'll tell you why. The Kotzker Rebbe says, because the horse is about to bend down to look into the water, and he sees another horse he thinks is going to drink up his water. He sees his own reflection, of course. So he thinks the other horse is going to take away his water. So he starts beating his feet to chase away the other horse, until he comes to realize that there's enough water for both horses. That's what the Kotzker Rebbe told. You understand the analogy with the competition. If you're secure with what you are, you don't have to be afraid of others. This doesn't mean, just to qualify, that every time someone does something, it's justified. That you have to tolerate people hurting you. That's not what I was saying. I'm not talking about that. But many of our so-called resentments, many of our difficulties with coexistence with others has a lot to do with us, not necessarily with the other person. And it has a lot to do with your own sense of identity, sense of purpose. As the Jews stood 3,320 years ago before Mount Sinai, their purpose of existence became crystal clear. It was at this mountain that just 6 days later, this is Rosh Chodesh, 6 days later, that they received the Torah. But even before receiving it, they became very aware of their own sense of self. And instead of it causing more divisiveness, it caused unity. And here is the ultimate principle in Jewish thought. The concept of unity is not the same as sameness. Unity does not mean cloning. When things are unified, they don't mean everything is the same. It means that everything is harmonious. Or the way we put it is that it's harmony within diversity. Unity is not a contradiction to diversity. On the contrary, unity is diversity, but in a harmonic fashion, synchronized diversity. Sameness is oneness. You could say something that's one entity, one personality. That's not unity. Unity implies that you're uniting something, various things. The word beauty is connected in Jewish thought, especially in mysticism, with unity. You have of the 7 spheres, you have the one called Tiferet. Tiferet means beauty. It also means compassion. And Tiferet is in the structure of the sporadic structure of the 10 spheres. It's the middle path. It's like like the spine. It unites the right and the left, the middle center. When you look at something, you say something is beautiful. So identifying what is beauty. You can have the color blue, as nice as the color is, and some people may love blue. It's one color. Then you have another color, red, and that has its own beauty. People have different preferences, or other colors. You have one musical note, it can be a beautiful note, but you keep playing it, it's called monotony, or even noise. What is the power of music or the power of art, what we call beauty, is where you take different colors, different shades, different hues, different musical notes, and you combine them in a certain synchronized fashion, and you have a force of beauty, a work of beauty. So it's the harmony of many different forces. Take those same musical notes and configure them differently, you'll have chaos. So never is a one-dimensional or one-celled entity ever beautiful. It can have certain beauty, but beauty is always harmony within diversity. You say a beautiful face. A beautiful face is very complicated to really define. I mean, you have all kinds of studies about what makes a beautiful face. Some say it's the proportions, some say it's the distance between different parts. But one thing is for sure, it's definitely not one-dimensional. It's about many different factors that combined in a particular right, so-called coordinated way, become something beautiful to our eyes. And this is true across the board. Though beauty is in the eyes of the beholder, so it's true some people will say some things are beautiful, other things are, and others would say something else is beautiful. But overall, it's just maybe different perspectives of what is harmony. But in all cases, it's harmony within diversity. It's never one-dimensional. Which is the interesting paradox, because had you reverse that diversity, you'll have major discord. So in a sense, beauty is only possible in a place where there's potential ugliness. To use it in an expression from the Bible, so the Bible says like this. The Bible enumerates the days of creation. Day 1, God created light. Yom Echad was the first day. Then it says, Vayar Elokim Asher Kitev. He saw the light and it was good. Then comes day 2. It says God separated between the higher firmament and the lower, the heaven and earth, or the higher waters and the lower waters. And it's the only time it doesn't say that God saw it was good. Then comes day 3. And there it says twice the word good, that God saw it was good twice. And what happened on day 3? God created vegetation. The power for life to perpetuate itself. Vegetation. One plant gives birth to another, seeds that give birth to another plant, etc., etc. And the way the expression is, Yom Shachuch B'Bay Kitayv. Yom Shlishi, the third day, is a day when there's a double good. So the question is asked, why is it in the first day it says good? Second day there's no good. There's no mention of the word good. And the third day, it's a double good. The fourth day is another single good, the fifth another single, and the sixth day again there's a double good. But that's not relevant to our discussion here. So there's a beautiful explanation given, that's also very psychological, that each day represents a particular type of so-called personality introduced into existence. So day 1, what was introduced? Light. Light is a form of oneness. Light is a type of oneness. So it's one. Day 2, God created diversity. He separated between the higher and the lower. So diversity was created. Diversity per se is a good thing, as we've been discussing. But, as the Medrash puts it, this was the day that the potential for all conflict was born. Because as long as there was only one entity, or we'd say the oneness of God, as the Arizal says, that before the Tzimtzum, the oneness of the light filled all of existence, there's no potential for conflict. Everything feels it's one. It's all part of one whole. Day 2, God created diversity, which really means that we are all separate creatures. And that we don't necessarily feel the oneness that connects us all. So on its own, there was a reason for that, as I'll discuss in a few minutes. But potentially, machlekes was created. Because without that, if we were not diverse creatures, we could never disagree. If we were all one, there would be no war, no conflict. This whole world would be a different type of world. What happened on day 3? On day 3, God created shalom, peace. That two entities can live in peace with each other. In Judaism, the word shalom doesn't just mean peace. When you say peace, often peace is seen as absence of war. You have war, you have peace. In Judaism, peace, shalom, means also completeness, wholesomeness. It's not just the absence of conflict. It's a state of its own. Even if there was no conflict, peace is the wholesomeness that a person has. Unfortunately, psychologically speaking, in our dysfunctional generation, as they call it, for many people, peace is simply the absence of war. If I'm not beat up that day, I already feel like it's a blessing. Why? Because our status quo has become one of negativity. If you grow up in an abusive home, every day is unpredictable. Whether you're going to get love or not, obviously, if there's a day where there's no damage, you already feel blessed. That's sad, because that standard is a very low one. The standard actually is that there's a thing called having actually be happy, not just because there's nothing bad that happened. The state of happiness that is an entity of its own. And in that context, the same thing with shalom. Peace is the harmony within diversity. So the second day cannot be called good, because it's not revealed good. We still don't know how this diversity is going to play itself out. It may turn into conflict. On day 3, when we see the peace, that different entities can work in harmony, then you have a double good. One for day 2 and one for day 3. That's the beauty, the harmony within diversity. So then why did God create a world where there can be potential conflict? Why not just keep a oneness, that we should all feel that we're one? Well, the answer, of course, lies then there would be no purpose in all of this. Then we're just playing out like puppets a pre-written script. We're partners in existence. It requires our wisdom and our discipline and our self-control to transcend the inclination of being separate entities and recognize that we're all musical notes of one large composition. That's the purpose of life, essentially. But to use Maimonides' language, the entire Torah was given. The Torah that will be given and recreated, as I said before, 3,320 years ago, on this Shavuot, the holiday coming up Sunday night. The whole Torah was given for what? Lasei shalom ba'olam, to bring peace to this world, harmony into this world. It's a pretty strong statement. You'll ask many Orthodox Jews, and you see them fighting with each other, or for that matter, forget about Orthodox Jews fighting with each other, and some do it in the name of Torah. So how does that work exactly? If the whole Torah is here to bring peace to the world, how is it that people who are Torah-abiding citizens are fighting with each other? How do you reconcile that? So of course the common justification is, as the guy said, there's going to be peace one way or another. The blood may spill, but I'm going to bring peace to this world. You know? People think that they're self-righteous. They think that my way is the way, the Torah way. And if everybody listened to me, there'd be peace in the world. So how do you distinguish whether the person is really humble and truly searching for truth, or maybe there's just arrogance masked in Torah? So I'll let you figure that out. But you know that there's two options are possible. And anyone that doesn't acknowledge those two options are possible, you can imagine that that's definitely not a sign of humility. So those two options are possible in all situations. And it's absolutely possible that some people, in the name of Torah, are doing everything counter to Torah. There's a thing called novel b'reshus HaTorah. You can be a menuvel, always look for the translation of this word, a obnoxious person, a despicable person, in the name of Torah. You use Torah to justify your despicably, you behave despicably. That would be a person, for example, who's so connected to a certain type of custom they have, and they embarrass anyone around them, so involved in their own selfishness and so on. Called religious arrogance. The truth is, it's not religious, and that's not Torah, but it masks as such. The purpose of Torah is to bring harmony into this world. You see someone that doesn't agree with you, let's say you see someone that's not as observant as you, instead of throwing stones or being condescending, or there's us and them, as I said before, Rav Shimon Bar Yochai, figure out a way to help lift them. Why don't you? Because you think that you are separate from them. So the whole Torah by you is not about peace. Didn't God create us all as human beings on one earth? That person is part of you. So how is it possible that you could hurt them in the name of Torah? It means because you're blinded and you don't see that there's a godly unity that connects us all. That's the bottom line. The Talmud in Yerushalmi says that the entire nation are like one organism. Ki'ish echad. So just like it's inconceivable that a right hand would hit a left hand if it did something wrong, it should be inconceivable that one person should hurt another. That's only if you feel we're all part of one entity, one organism. A healthy father or mother, if their child behaved in the wrong way, they wouldn't expel them or excommunicate them. Why? Because they feel it's part of you. It's like part of you that did something wrong. So how is it possible that you can have people who follow so dogmatically and so stringently Torah, and they do everything opposite Laseh Shalom Bela? Because it's back to the arrogance. They may even be doing, they may be scholars, they may even be doing good mitzvahs and so on and so forth, but they're missing the foundation. As Hillel said, the whole Torah is built on love. Don't do it to others that you don't want done it to yourself. You could even interpret that to mean, don't do unto others because they're part of you, yourself. We're part of one, but we don't feel it. This is the choice we're given. So God created a world where there's possible conflict all the time because we're diverse. As soon as there are two people in a room, there's a possibility of battle. But there's also a possibility of music, of beauty. So it's our choice, beauty or the beast. Beauty or battle. It's our choice all the time. Now, of course, the complicated part of it is that it makes sense in our minds. The complicated part is the emotions. We have moments of insanity. We're blinded. We cannot see clearly. And when you don't see clearly, all this logic and all this beautiful poetry simply becomes irrelevant. Or it's abstract and not affect you in your life. Just like people who can't control their rage, or people who can't control other emotions, what happens? I mean, many people I know who have issues with rage, they will say, honestly, I really can't control myself. Some don't say that. That's even worse trouble. They're always blaming everyone else. That person did this to me, that one, that. But we're talking about some people who have come to that and they just say, I don't know what happens. A button is pressed and that's it. I'm out of control. So that's already progress. I'm not saying it's optimal, but at least the person's acknowledged. And you try to analyze it. You say, what is it? If you know afterwards that it's not the thing, you know that this will happen, that you have this uncontrollable rage inside of you, why can't you take precautions? Because something happens in the human being where we become blind. That's simple as that. We're blind. Nothing more, nothing less. And when you're blind, it makes no difference what you knew a moment before or what you know a moment from now. This moment you're blind and anything can happen. It's a blind spot. Now, how does one get out of that place? I don't have a quick solution for things that are deeply embedded in our behavior, because it goes back many years. So just like it took years to be part of you, it's not going to just go away overnight. But everything can be remedied. It requires, obviously, internal work, behavioral work, and above all, humility. It requires you to be able to acknowledge that there's something more powerful than you. The basis of all the 12-step program is the basis of all growth, not just for recovering alcoholics or recovering addicts or something like that, is that there's a power that's higher than you. You came to Mount Sinai. The Jews did not have to be necessarily ill to recognize. They recognized a higher presence. A higher presence is for all of us, not just those that need the 12-step program. Some people say everyone needs the 12-step program. That's another discussion. But long before there were 12 steps, there were the 613 steps. Just too much for mankind, I guess. And they all began with Anochi Hashem Elekecha, the first commandment of the 10 that we will hear in the reading of the Torah on Monday morning in the synagogues. I am your God. There's a higher presence than you. It's not all about you. There's something that puts you here. And how you define God in your life, or the different philosophical ways of interpreting, but it all comes back, Anochi Hashem Elekecha. And I am the one that took you out of Egypt, and I have the power to free you from your Mitzrayim, from your constraints, to the first of all commandments. Before thou shalt not steal, and before thou shalt not murder, and before the others. Because it's the foundation of everything that you are not where it all begins and ends. There's something higher than you. And that's ultimately the secret to all growth and all truth and all integrity. Because why should a person have integrity if there's no higher presence? If there's no higher presence, you can make the case, listen, if I'm smarter, more manipulative, I can get away with it. Hey. So as we stand today in Rosh Chodesh Sivan, as I said, it's 3,320 years. I feel good saying that. Why? Because, and repeating it many times, it gives you a sense of security. You knowing that for 3,320 years, this day was celebrated. It's power. How many things in life do we have that are that long? In business, they always like to say, coming here, I heard the radio, they're in business since 1909, whatever, 89 years, giving advice on finance. Or brewing beer since 1870 or something like that. Why is that used? Even though these businesses have clearly changed many hands many times, they're probably owned by someone that doesn't give but it's because it elicits a trust. Oh, the family's in business, they must know what they're doing. They did it so many years, they must really know what they're doing. And maybe true. Some of them maybe have mastered a secret, a trade secret or something like that. But in most cases, it's a marketing gimmick. So we can say, and I could sit here and say that we are in this business for 3,320 years. Nobody makes that claim. From the day when we stood at Mount Sinai. And whether you're a bigger believer or a smaller believer, some historical things cannot be disputed. I'm not getting into now a discussion what exactly happened at Sinai. But clearly this thing was not created 10 years ago or 20 years ago. It goes back those thousands of years, documented in the Bible. And I'm not here trying to prove anything, just stating that. So there's a certain feeling to know that it's the first time that in 3,320 years we're sitting here and talking about a people that came out of Egypt literally 40 days ago, a little more than 40 days ago, 43 days ago. And they stood at a mountain, and the mountain was more than a mountain, it was a presence. And they recognized a power that united them all. And they were able to transcend their differences. And out of strength, not out of weakness. This does not mean that they compromise themselves. This does not mean that you get annihilated. So in love, the big question always is, if I love somebody, if I marry somebody, does that mean I lose my individuality and independence? Albeit with the excuse because I get something else in return that's bigger. The security, love, build a family and home. That is often the perception. That there's some people who don't feel there's anything in it, even they don't want to have long-term commitment or any commitment altogether. But even those, many will say, the commitment means that I will give up something, but I'll get something bigger in return. I get eternity. I'll have children, grandchildren, generations. My parents did it and generations before. So I'm here to tell you that based on the story of today's day, it's not the case. Love does not mean compromise. It may require times to compromise, obviously. It goes without saying. That's in a normal situation. You even do that in business for a greater gain. But there's something much deeper. That when two people can come to a point that even though they have difference of opinion, they can come to a point where love is stronger, this doesn't mean that they gave up their opinions or they gave up their identities. In our day and age, many people feel that's the case. They feel, I'm giving up my identity, and that's too much. As a fierce individualistic spirit, how could I give that up? And that's why we see love or we see commitment as a compromise. As I said, sometimes it's worth it. But that's also a big distortion of what love really is. In the people who are weak and insecure, yes, love would mean you love each other, but sometimes you're going to have to defer. Or as one couple tells me, she defers the first week, I defer the next week. That's the way they work. And too bad if 1 week I'm deferring in things that I just can't. That's their rule. How long that's going to last, I really don't know. But I suggested, why don't you do it by hour? But it's too complicated. This way they have a calendar. It's his week. This is hers. Okay. So of course they all save up for their week to get what they want. They can pull that off, then all credit, then their love must be deep. But there's a deeper element of love. A love means that you transcend yourself to a higher presence. It's not you deferring to her or to him. What happens if there's a God that's higher than both of you and asking you to do something? And you do so as partners. So you're deferring together. It's not just about one who's winning. As I said, out of weakness it would appear that way. But if it's out of strength, think of the wise man I mentioned, or the wise woman, that exercises restraint and knows how to transmit in a way that the receiver can receive. Is that a compromise? If you're a good teacher, and instead of sharing all your brilliance, you dress it up in metaphor so the student can hear it, is that a compromise of the truth? If the teacher says that, there's something seriously wrong. And some people will say, I'm here, I'm the big professor, I'm going to tell you the way it is, get it or don't get it, record it, review it. So like an act of benevolence, they're going to share from their brilliant pedestal wisdom. That's not the sign of true wisdom. Moses was the humblest, yet the greatest teacher. The greatest teacher is not about you. Who really cares about your benevolence? It's about understanding that they're recipients, and that restraint is not a compromise of your intelligence. It's what's right. And that is ultimately what true love and out of strength happens. As the Jews stood at Mount Sinai, it wasn't they suddenly felt, I don't really care about the differences between me and my neighbor because I have something bigger happening. No, they were lifted to another place where the differences melt away in a sense. There's something more important going on. And they know that their differences will not be compromised. They'll know they'll bring them back after they left the mountain. Trust me, they had plenty of arguments. But they also know there's another force. And when that force comes into play, it's almost like the composer enters the room, so the music starts playing the music. Composer leaves the room, so that every musical note goes off on its own. So that's not a compromise. It's on the contrary, it's enhancing who you are. People who love each other out of strength, they will say that I learned from the person I love when I deferred to become more me, not less of me. Now I know that's not so common. We don't find that common today because, as I said, we live in an insecure world, and we're all in this vicious cycle of being right or being afraid that our turf is being intruded upon. And I see this many, many times. Many of us, because we grew up in homes where our parents did not have healthy boundaries with us, become very, very fearful of someone stepping into your turf. People who fight for their little space often is people who've been encroached upon. So there's a lot of justification. I'm not suggesting that there is no reason for us to be that way, but you don't want to stay there because that's basically remaining a victim to your past, to your childhood. It comes down to ultimately recognizing that you are indispensable, and that indispensability can never be taken away even if you are deferring. And when you defer, maybe your indispensability is actually enhanced. So the challenge is, how do we get to a point that we can feel indispensable? That's the challenge. Not how do we get to a point that everybody's going to agree with you, or that you no longer have to defer, or you don't have to compromise. It's finding that sense of self. And that, I would say, is the challenge that we face as we approach today to Mount Sinai. And we relive, and we commemorate and recreate the events that happened then. It's interesting, in the Haggadah, when we say Dayenu, Passover Seder, so there's one of the lines that says, all those expressions, even if you just took us out of Egypt and you'd not, it's hard to see, also been enough, Dayenu. But then there's a line that, okay, that one makes sense. But then there's a line, Ilu hikrivanu l'Har Sinai. Even had you brought us close to Mount Sinai and not given us the Torah, that would have been enough. What kind of statement is that? What does that mean? What's the point of standing on Mount Sinai if you're not going to receive the Torah? Why is that enough? And the answer is because standing on Mount Sinai itself was a presence of awe. Giving the Torah obviously was far greater, but that presence itself brought that unity. 6 days before Shavuos would come, before Mount Torah would come, which will be, as I said, Sunday night, on this day, on the first day of Sivan, there was already a unity that settled, a presence that settled for the people. Ki ish echad b'leiv echad. It's really a beautiful expression. Hard to capture completely in Hebrew, but in English, the Hebrew's ki ish echad means like one man or one person with one heart. So it's both like the body, one organism, and also the heart as one. But oneness, remember, as I said, is unity, is harmony within diversity. It's not one as opposed to, it's not cloning and sameness. It's about recognizing the differences. Now imagine if we could celebrate our differences and at the same time recognize that we're all complementary musical notes. Even if you imagine that, you're already getting there. I could tell you that this is in our control. Because if we're a room like ours, sitting right here, right now, if we could make the decision, even for 5 minutes, for 10 minutes, to behave that way, and you'd see how it resonates, then it's just a matter. Remember, this globe is 6 billion people, small groups like us. After all, 6 billion people are just 6 billion individuals. It's an enormous number, and they're not, and so on. But if it can make sense to us for a few minutes, why wouldn't it make sense to everybody? So we're back to square one in the sense that everyone would say, you know what, like a smokeout day, they'll have a day where we're all going to be in harmony. Problem is, as we all know, the problem is not each of us would be ready to do so, but we'd say the others aren't ready. Each of us would say, I'm ready to do so, but we're going to be peeking. Who's running to the cookie jar first? You know? That's really the truth. And like they say, kol ha-paisel b'mumay paisel. It means if you see fault in someone else, it probably means you have that fault yourself. That's why you're suspicious, because you know you are capable of running to the cookie jar. So it's a vicious cycle. It's a difficult one to overcome. But it's an interesting, I guess I don't call it a mind game because I don't see it as a theory, but it's a possibility. The Torah feels that this is absolutely doable. Though it's difficult, though our inclination is absolutely towards selfishness and self-interest, but there's a part of us that recognizes our own blind spots that allow us also to be self-destructive with all the self-interest. And it's this transcendence that allows us to get to that place. So on a practical note, how do we access this? The Mount Sinai today? Well, I don't think it's about meditating, looking at a mountain tonight on the internet or something, but rather I would think it's the spirit of it, which is, as we prepare for Shavuos, one custom that has been implemented in this generation is that everybody should try to make an effort to hear the 10 Commandments read in the Torah in the synagogue. And not just adults, but even children, even newborn children. To sense, in a sense, as the Medrash says, to recreate the experience that happened then. Just doing that, being in a synagogue with generations, the older, middle-aged, the younger, and the little children, is itself a pretty awesome experience. So that's one way to bring yourself there. It's finding an environment, and sometimes in a very physical sense, that will help you experience awe, transcendence, because that allows you to rise a moment above yourself. Now, of course, the challenge will be how do you maintain that when you return, so to speak. Okay, but if you go there with an intention and knowing that this is what I want to experience, it will help it will be a big head start to implementing it. So as you know, I don't know if I can give you a magic trick, this is what you do, and it's over with all our conflicts and problems and so on. But the first step is recognizing Anochi Hashem Elokecha, that there's a mountain that's greater than us. And the mountain itself is a symbol of power, but also a symbol of humility. It says that when God gave the Torah to the people, He asked them for guarantors. You know, some collateral, something to guarantee the great gift He was giving. So of course the first thing they offered were the sages and the scholars. They'll study and analyze and dedicate themselves to Torah. God rejected that. Then they offered the strongest of the nation, and they offered all kinds of offering they made. And finally they came to realize that it was their last option, and no one would have thought of it. They offered Banenu, our children. Banenu Arevim Adenu. They offered their children as guarantors, and that God immediately accepted. And the logic is obvious, because then you know there's a future. You know it's not just going to stay with the scholars will die. What happens then? The children, you're going to Vishanamtam Levanecha, you'll teach it to your children, as we say in the Shema. Then I know that it's safeguarded, it's going to be perpetuated. But if you think about it for a moment, it's a little more than just the fact that children will continue it. is because children carry the power of eternity, the power of a perpetuation. That itself is an awesome thing. Any of us here blessed with children know what I'm talking about. And those of us not blessed yet, God should bless you. But that doesn't mean we can't come in contact with children, and we cannot. We could observe them. They have the power to renew your contract with life because they have the hope, the future. So even if we mess up, you could always look at a child and say, "Here's some potential." That's why there's great gratification in teaching, especially children. So in a way, it's like your own redemption. And parents feel that, teachers feel that, anyone that deals with children. So if you're looking for something to remind you of a higher presence, that's where it is. So the children were guarantors, obviously for the obvious reason, because they would perpetuate it, but also because they allow you to transcend yourself. They allow you to go to a higher place. It's not that easy. Us adults in an adult world, where we're busy with all kinds of machinations and conspiracies and planning and strategies, to suddenly bring yourself to deal with a few children, doesn't seem like a very great feat, but it's a real act of transcendence. In the Maggid of Mezrich, the student of the Baal Shem Tov, when he gives metaphors, which he gives many, one of his favorite metaphors that he gives is of a father, a sage, bending down to lift up a child. And he just explains that describing just the fact that the father bends down, just that act of humbly bending down and lifting a child on his hands is in itself one of the most divine type of experiences, because it's transcendence. It's beyond you, beyond your intelligence, and it's what refines and elevates our intelligence to truth, because it's about the truth, not about who you are. So, in this spirit, as we stand on this day of Rosh Chodesh Kislev, and as Rashi writes that this is the day of one person, one heart, may we all take some of this and maybe let it spill a little into your day, into your work, into the people you know. And we will probably have good reasons to hold grudges or good reasons to blame everyone else. But the bottom line is, it's your control how you're going to see yourself and see others. And if you transcend, you become a greater person and you become less hostage to the forces around you. That's the bottom line. He said a very good line, Rabbi Tlushkin, last night. He gave a lecture, though some of you may have been there. We have this lecture every year in honor of my father. Well, every year. It's the third year. So he said that when you allow someone who's abused you to consume your life, you're basically giving them a rent-free home in your mind. You're allowing them to control your life. So transcendence is much about this idea of being able to take control of your life, not others controlling it, not others that hurt you, whether it's legitimate, not even parents, but really taking control. And Shavuos is really the holiday, or one of the holiday that helps us get there, because we reconnect to the mountain, we can reconnect to the one who put us here, the one who made us indispensable in the first place. It's not our parents, it's not our employers, it's not our employees, it's not your clients. It's God that gave you indispensability. No one else can give that to you. Because only an indispensable entity can share indispensability. Everyone else is dispensable. But we have a part of that in ourselves. So may we all celebrate that part, and you do so through yourself, through sharing with others, and lifting ourselves, as they say, a tefach hech, an inch higher than the mundane. So with that being said, everyone should have a very powerful holiday in Shavuos. I actually will be for the holiday in Riverdale. Planned a long time ago as like a so-called, I hate the expression scholar in residence, the whole thing, but let's call it a roving scholar there. I don't know if I'm a scholar, but I'll be roving there.
There's no hotels in Riverdale.
There you go. Very uplifting message.
So you must be going slum.
But there are many, many good Jews there that will be welcoming you into their homes. How do you like that? So, if any of you are there, I shall be there. 48-hour marathon of study and so on. But wherever you are, may you have a very good holiday. We will be here back right afterwards on Wednesday night, next Wednesday. And I bid good evening to, or good morning, or wherever you are in New Zealand, I know. Really. To all of you web audience, and to all of you, we should have a very blessed holiday. It should be a good new beginning in celebrating our indispensability face of the great mountain as one person with one heart. Good night. Now, if you want to leave me your email address, if you don't get the weekly emails, we'll send you those emails. And any other announcements? Well, have a very good Yom Tov and a good holiday. And if anybody needs anything in their spiritual journey, please contact me. Be well.